so many of us live by limitation and fear. And listen, man, we only go around once.
Yeah.
This is it. This is not a dress rehearsal.
Support for this show comes from Exit Factor. Exit Factor offers a proven method that helps small to mid-sized business owners maximize their company's value. Through one-to-one consulting services and online programs, the trusted advisors at Exit Factor teach entrepreneurs how to successfully navigate and fully leverage strategies when buying, building, and selling their companies. Participants that follow the program have experienced considerable results, with some increasing business value as much as 57% in 1 year. It's time to start running your business every day like you are going to sell it. Learn more at exitfactor.com/pod. Now enjoy How I Sold.
Welcome to How I Sold, presented by Exit Factor. Only 13% of all businesses in the U.S. are sold, but we only hear about the billion-dollar stories. Here we explore the real-life stories of entrepreneurs and business owners like you that were able to build, grow, and sell their small businesses. Now, here is your business exit expert, #1 best-selling author, and host, Jessica Fialkovich.
Welcome to How I Sold. I'm Jessica Fialkovich, and I created this podcast after spending over a decade in mergers, acquisitions, and exits, and noticing that we often hear the stories of the unicorn sales. You know, those companies valued at over $1 billion. But we often don't hear the real life stories. The stories of the thousands of entrepreneurs every year that build, grow, and sell their small businesses. These are their stories. Today on the show, can you do it twice? That is the question that Erik Holmberg had to ask himself after he built and sold his own company, Windward Electric, for the first time. Can he do it again? Without giving out too much away and revealing major spoilers, Erik did what only about 13% of entrepreneurs do, build and sold a business from scratch, but then he had to do it again. Along the way, his motto, failure is not an option, drove him through some of the toughest challenges business owners and people will ever face. Join us today and listen to How I Sold Windward Electric. Welcome to the show, everyone. And today I'm excited to welcome Erik Holmberg. He recently exited his electrical contracting business, and he's here to tell us his story. Erik, welcome to How I Sold.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's start at the beginning. Where did you grow up? What were your dreams growing up? Were you one of those kids that knew you were going to be an entrepreneur or a business owner from, selling lemonade on the street corner? Or what did you think you were going to be when you grew up?
Sure. Good lead in there. So, originally from Boulder, Colorado, in that area. And, talk about lemonade stands. Sure. I had a lemonade stand. Actually, one of the funny stories that my mom keeps reminding me of is I came home one day with money in my lunchbox and she asked me what was going on. And I told her, well, I sold my sandwich. Right. So I always had some sort of entrepreneurial aspect to me. I always knew that I was kind of a little bit different than everybody else. Certainly not someone who's going to follow the herd. I didn't really know what that meant, but I kind of did know that my path was going to be a little bit different than the standard norm. And, it certainly was. So yeah, again, growing up in the Boulder, Colorado area, certainly had my share of entrepreneur experiences there.
I love it. What did you have for lunch that day when you sold your sandwich? Or was just the profit more important than the actual calories that day?
This was some time ago. I don't exactly remember. Maybe it wasn't quite that awesome, which is why I sold it. No, I was just kind of curious what, where it would go and what I could do. So, that's awesome. Yeah.
So you said you took a non-traditional path. Did that path take you to college or university, or what was your step after school?
Sure. So growing up in the area, I felt like I really needed to go see the world. And I ended up going to college up in Washington State at a small liberal arts school called the University of Puget Sound. I had the experience of wanting to, again, break away from the norm. I grew up with a father who really wasn't enjoying his job, and he spent a lot of his time in a cubicle. So think of, like the Dilbert comic strip, right? Yeah, that kind of life. And I was just, die hard to do the opposite of that, which I did. So I got an art degree, and luckily I had a bachelor's of fine arts and a business degree to support me underneath that. And I went to school, University of Puget Sound up in Tacoma, Washington. And that's kind of also where I learned that I really love sailing too, which we can get into a little later.
Nice. So an arts degree and a business degree too. That's an interesting combination. What was your plan after you completed university? What was going to be your first career step?
Well, so when I graduated with an art degree, I found myself in a quandary. Either I could just go to join Peace Corps, or I could go just traveling. And I ended up actually pursuing scuba diving after that. And I ended up getting a job as a scuba instructor, and I became a scuba instructor up in Lake Washington. You couldn't pay me enough to go do that again, by the way, but
really?
It's very, very cold. Very cold stuff. So I ended up from there moving to the Virgin Islands, believe it or not. Didn't know a soul, and kind of threw a dart at the map. Somebody had hired me and then left the company, and I just showed up on an island not knowing anyone, and they said, "Oh, you're here. Well, I guess we should figure out a job for you." So I really just was chasing my bliss, chasing my dreams at this point, in my early 20s, just not really with much focus on any big plan.
Yeah. Well, you're seeing the world, right? What you set out to do is you wanted to experience the world. So scuba diving in Lake Washington to the British Virgin Islands or U.S. Virgin Islands?
U.S. Virgin Islands. I was in St. Croix, which, by the way, is, if you're into scuba diving, is fantastic for scuba diving.
And warmer, right?
Oh, quite a bit. Yeah. Yes. Quite a bit warmer. Yes, absolutely. So I had a lot of great experiences there. And went through, even earned my boat captain's license, and bought a boat and lived on it. And then I learned how to sail after that. So nice. that was all part of that.
And I see the theme we're going to come back to around here at sailing. I see where this love is established. So we're laying the groundwork and foundation. So our listeners will have to stay till the end of the episode to hear all that. But so you're exploring the world, you're learning a lot about life. When does the bug hit you, or what's the meaning? Why did you end up starting your own company or getting into entrepreneurship?
Sure. So let me just connect a few dots here. Yep. So I ended up living on this boat and not having much understanding of electricity at this time. And I ended up being exposed to some night classes that I took for a whole year, got a job at the local refinery, and then with the whole intention of putting lights on. And it was a total career change for me from scuba diving. So I actually was hired as an electrician, fixed up the boat, sailed to Trinidad and Tobago, where I met my wife, and bam, instant family. In 2003, we're back in the area because, I showed up back on American soil with a pregnant wife and a stepson, and going to work for a variety of different contractors. And eventually, actually, my wife planted the bug in my ear. She says, "Why don't you just go out and do this for yourself?" And she was an entrepreneur as well. When I first met her, she was running her own business. In fact, a mutual friend had introduced us, and she was just crushing it in her business exploits at the time. So, like attracts like in some instances there. So it really wasn't until about 2007 that I said, "Hey, you know what? I kept getting laid off, hired for the job, laid off, hired for the job, laid off." And finally went out on my own in 2008 as an electrical contractor.
So quite a jump for pursuing scuba, sailing, boating to electrical contracting. But I'm glad you made that connection of just figuring it out on your own. And then it is interesting. I like the like attracts like, right? And I do find a lot of entrepreneurs, their spouses are involved either in their business or a different business. It's just easier to, I think, understand and support each other. Not all the time, but sometimes. What was your wife's business when you guys met? And is she still in that business?
Yeah. So she had a business doing sewing and mending and laundry, and she also would, make upholstery and different things. So this is just to paint a little bit of a picture. Trinidad in the West Indies, it became a mecca and a hub for boat repairs because a lot of insurance companies said, we'll only insure your boat if it's below this certain latitude during this time of year because of hurricanes. And
Right.
so that puts you in Trinidad. So as a result, like that's kind of the end of the trail where everybody ends up. And she just ended up also befriending and creating a whole community, which she does everywhere she goes. And, a fisherman would show up and say, hey, can you store this? She started selling beer. She started selling, all sorts of snacks and whatever, just anything she could get her hands on. So yeah, she's definitely an inspiration.
Wow. Yeah. It's the opportunity, right? And just being open to the opportunities. It sounds like that's what she was doing, and she was able to build the business that way. So, you meet each other. Now you've got a family, you're back in Boulder, Colorado. You've been hopping job to job, which is not uncommon in a lot of trades areas and contracting. Now you mentioned you decided to start your business. What was it, 2007 or 2008, right around that time?
Yeah, right about. It was really March of 2008. And of course, we all know what happened in 2008.
Yeah, I was saying very interesting because September in 2008, there's just like this little blip in the economy that starts, right? So tell us about that first year, founding the company and going through, one of the largest recessions that most of us have seen in our lifetime, in your first year in business.
Sure. So for me, it was all about tenacity. My wife at the time was not, she was a legal resident, but she was not a citizen. And plus, with her earning potential, it just didn't make sense. And, with childcare and all that good fun stuff. So I really knuckled down in that first year. It was like when the bottom dropped out of the whole economy, it was like, I'll do anything. I'll drive an hour Sunday morning, 6 o'clock in the morning and go crawl under a mobile home, anything to provide as a father, as a breadwinner. There was a lot of tenacity and a lot of pressure there. Yeah. Right. In the midst of that, we're also doing property flips, which the wife and I, we did very well on. Right. So we'd buy HUD homes and we would flip those in the winter. I was even doing that before I went out on my own, which is actually what started it all. I was saying, I want to upgrade the service. And the local inspection authority said, well, you have to have your master electrician license. I said, okay, well, then that's what I got to do. So, right. So yeah, the first year of business, I just didn't know anything other than just putting the head down and just grinding, just absolute grind.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And I think that a lot of entrepreneurs experience that, their first year, a couple of years in business, but right around that time period, 08, 09, 2010, even more so, right? Everyone was in survival mode. So how long do you think you estimate it took you to get through that survival mode period to the point where you're like, you know what, this is actually working. Like as a business, we're doing okay.
Well, I didn't consider failure as an option. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't on the table at all whatsoever. So, man, that's a really tough question to ask because it just kind of all shaped as it came. Yeah. I was very, very strategic and cautious about growing the business and stepping it up. At first I started with 1099s to have help along the way. Because listen, as we know, you're a business person, right? Mm-hmm. As we start in business, the benefit of success is more challenges. Because if we're good at what we're doing, we have now so much work that we have to figure out how to find somebody else to help us. And then that becomes a new skill now that we have to learn. And if and when we transcend that, then we have to figure out how to train managers to do the original work that we started doing. Yeah. And so it basically unfolded for me. Like I said, I started with 1099s and I found I just couldn't get the commitment and the quality control that I was looking for. So then actually throughout the whole episode between 2008 and 2014, I was hiring coaches, consultants. I hired an HR coach to help me figure out what is this whole employee thing, right? Hiring and firing, I don't want to get sued. And how does that all work? Right. And performance assessments and all that good fun stuff. So yeah, I was basically hiring on and educating myself and implementing as I went.
Yeah. And you bring up a really good point, because I think, and we'll get into like challenges and things you've overcome, but one of the resounding common challenges I see business owners face is building that team. And most business owners, so like for our listeners, most business owners do not become an entrepreneur or a business owner because that was their plan in life, not because they were selling their sandwiches, right, in grade school. It's really more they were good at a trade. And Erik, you did the same thing too. You're good at a trade, you're a trade technician, and then you decided to go out on your own. That's like 80% of business owners. That's why they start their own business, not because they want to build a culture, build a team, hire people, deal with HR issues. So one of the biggest challenges I see for all entrepreneurs is overcoming that. How do I now build a team to support me in the business? So it sounds like you did a lot through help, experience, coaches, consultants. Was there any real shifts for you as the owner too that you made during that time period in terms of mindset or what you were doing day to day that allowed you to build that team?
It was just the grind. I was just, again, failure is not an option. And there's another chapter, all this, which we'll get to, but I did learn about how to treat people and how to look for the right person. But really in this first chapter, I was really just doing it for myself. It was very self-preservation oriented. It was very, what is this going to do for me? Because, hey, we all know what we know until we know something new.
Right.
And then we know that. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I had quite a bit of experiences figuring out how to basically provide the infrastructure. This is a big aha moment. Actually, it was to provide the infrastructure for the employees to be successful. Mm-hmm. Right. A lot of times I was trying to run it so thin that I was like, I don't know, just go out there and figure it out just like I'm figuring it out. And that was too much of an expectation to lay upon someone else. And actually it would shine through to the customers too. I would hear about it from them. They're like, I'm not really sure that they've got everything they need. And so then I learned to invest in infrastructure and training and tools and things of that nature for the employees. Yeah.
That's a big aha moment and really a big way. People talk about culture a lot. And like, I think people think it's like this esoteric thing, but ultimately giving them the tools, the resources, training and systems they need to be successful. That's the baseline of building a great culture and a great business. So I love that aha. What are some of the other challenges during your growing years, during this 07 to 14 period that you guys feel like you overcame as a business?
Well, so I joined up with a mastermind group, and that year the gross profits were not really great, but the second year it doubled. And I chose to put myself in a room with business owners and managers and entrepreneurs that were playing a much bigger game than I was. And it was intimidating, but as my normal way of doing things, I tend to just grab myself and throw caution to the wind and just propel myself into it and then figure out how to handle it. So, I did have to figure out there was one moment actually where, there was an employee who got hurt on the job and I had to figure out how to handle that, the whole work comp thing, how to be there for them without judgment, even though what he did was very unwise and avoidable. I also had my first insurance claim where part of a house actually caught fire. And we had been working on it, and it really wasn't any negligence on our part. Anything was just like a weird freak accident, but I was dropped by the insurance company. And I was just like, holy moly, what are we going to do now? Right? I got to find another insurance company, try and explain that, and you can't go without insurance and all that. So yeah, it was to navigate that certainly put a couple gray hairs up here.
Yeah. Of course. Well, and I think I love that you bring that up because these are like the things that keep business owners up at night. And I think the truth of the matter is that things like this happen in all businesses, right? Whether it's an actual physical fire or it's like, the metaphorical fire in the business. But I think, and I love what I'm hearing from you in our overarching conversation is, there's no option for failure, right? You just keep moving ahead. You figure things out. There's going to be obstacles and adversity that we have to overcome in our business. And it sounds like that's what you did, no matter what roadblock you faced.
Absolutely. That's it. But I will say though, I was so committed. I mean, we all know about the neural synapses, and the more we generate a habit is the more that we do that habit, right? Mm-hmm. I got to the point in 2013, I could not disengage. Mm-hmm. I was working Saturdays too. I mean, I was, working 12-hour days, and I lost myself. Mm-hmm. I didn't know who I was. Yeah. And, I saw my kids getting older. And my wife and I were looking at each other, and bear in mind, I met her when we were sailing. I'm going to bring the boat back in again because it's a consistent theme. And we said, why don't we go traveling? What are we really doing at that point? We had 2 kids. I have a son and a daughter, and they're ages 8 and 10 at that time. Yep. And we said, let's go live a different kind of life. And so we ended up buying a 40-foot catamaran.
Wow.
And in the Caribbean. Yep. And then I said, you know what? I guess I should probably figure out how to sell my business then.
I love it. But what's so funny is that when I talk to people, a lot of people are running away from their business is how I describe it, right? They're just like, just get me away from this thing, but they don't have anything they're running to, like something that's going to provide them passion or purpose or life after they're done with their business. And you almost did it opposite. You're like, hey, I have this thing I'm super passionate about. I'm going to run towards that, and then I'll figure out the business, which I almost think is kind of a better way to do it, because then you have this guiding light or reason that you're going to put in all the work and the perseverance and overcome the adversity that we're going to talk about now. So this is what year is this that you guys buy the catamaran?
So this is the end of 2013. So actually, we moved on a boat in June of 2014.
Okay. Moved on the boat June 2014. Did you get rid of your house in Boulder or?
No, we rented it. And in the meantime, we actually were through our process of property investing. We found there was a rental or two that we couldn't sell. Well, actually there was a house flip that we couldn't sell. So we became landlords by default. Yep. And I have to say that really was a big part of saving our bacon later. So we rented out our house in Longmont, and as well as 2 other properties. And that became kind of like the second backup income generator. Yep. And I sold the business on a handshake. I tried to figure out how to sell it to employees. I really didn't feel like I had the right leadership in there. And I was going one direction. In the last minute, I found somebody who was already growing another business. He had started with HVAC. He had acquired a plumbing business. And I said, he wanted to merge all 3 with electrical, which is a model that can really work because it's very complementary. You've got home services, and, electrical and plumbing and HVAC are different from a lot of the other trades like painting or roofing, in the sense that you have to have employees. If you have painting and roofing, they're all subs. Well, the majority of them, maybe not all, but everyone that I've come across, so it's just a different model. There's a lot of trust that's involved in there. But in any case, so I sold the thing on a handshake. I gave him a payment plan, and, sure. Yep. Everything's going to be good. And I got on a plane and I left the country. And, for the first year, so we're in Martinique, right? Okay. So I'm on a boat in the Caribbean with 2 kids, figuring out homeschooling, right? Getting a whole new rhythm. One of my first days down there, I fall in the water with my cell phone that was supposedly waterproof. And that was actually the best thing that could have happened, because I lost all track of time. I didn't even have a watch. I had no idea. I was like, when I'm hungry, I eat. Yeah. It's dark. I guess I'll go to bed. Like, it was literally just completely just wipe the slate clean, which is honestly what I needed. Absolutely at that time. So yeah, just full connection with the kids, full connection with my wife, just, immersion, so to speak, pardon the pun there, but all about it, all about traveling and new cultures. It was a fantastic experience.
Yeah. I think it's, a situation a lot of people dream of doing. And I think you're a good example. Is like, you can pull this off, right? You can do this. You can homeschool your children, give them the experience and education around life and different cultures. So you've sold the business. Now, when you say handshake, like literal handshake, was there paperwork involved or anything?
There was paperwork, and yeah, absolutely. I hired a lawyer to help me look through all of it. I even made sure that there was a life insurance policy, with me as beneficiary. I wasn't completely naive about it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it went quickly, and there was not a lot of feedback from the buyer. Yep. And because there wasn't a lot of skin in the game either,
you did mostly seller financing, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. That was it. I'm like, I'm going to go, here's my best option.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
for the beginning, it sounds like it was going fine, right?
Yeah. The first year was great. We had a payment plan. You made the payments. I did check in on very rare occasions just to see how things were going. But, for the most part, I was in my own world and my new life and everything. And then actually about 1 year in, he stopped making payments.
Mm.
And so, there I am in the Caribbean, and I'm like trying to figure out, what are we going to do? How's this going to play out? So I, worked my network, and I found the best headhunter and the litigation firm that I could find, and basically started paying them that he had paid me in the first year. Right. Wow. Yeah. And then at the end of, in about April of 2016, mm-hmm. I got the dreaded call. I was just thinking about it this morning because I knew about the podcast. Yeah. I got the call. I remember exactly where I was, the color of the sky and everything. I'm on the sat phone, and I hear the words Chapter 7. Oh. And I'm like, what does that mean? And they're like, well, you don't really get anything out of it. And so my nest egg, everything, it just dried up.
When we come back in just a moment, Erik has just found out that the person that bought his business has not only stopped making payments, but is filing for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which means he gets nothing. Stay with us. I'm Jessica Fialkovich, and you're listening to How I Sold. Support for this show comes from Exit Factor. Have you ever wondered if your business is sellable? The truth is, thousands of businesses sell every year, from just a few $1,000s to billions. Now, there are a ton of experts that will teach you how to start a business, more on how to grow one, but only Exit Factor will teach you how to build a valuable and efficient business that is sellable at any time, no matter what happens. Visit exitfactor.com/pod to learn more about us and take our free assessment to find out if your business is sellable. That's exitfactor.com/pod. Hey, welcome back to How I Sold. I'm Jessica Fialkovich. We're with Erik Holmberg, founder of Windward Electric. When we previously left before the break, Erik had sold his business to what he thought was a qualified buyer. And after a year of making payments and sailing in the Caribbean and Europe, he thought his life plan was coming to fruition. But when the buyer stopped making payments and filed for bankruptcy, Erik's world was immediately thrown upside down. Add in a catastrophic accident, and things are about to change very quickly.
Yeah. I got the call. I remember exactly where I was, the color of the sky and everything. I'm on the sat phone, and I hear the words Chapter 7. Oh. And I'm like, what does that mean? And they're like, well, you don't really get anything out of it. And so my nest egg, everything, it just dried up. Mm-hmm. So there we are. We're sitting on the boat. Meantime, we've actually gone to Europe and back. We actually crossed the Atlantic twice on the boat. And we brought on extra crew to go with us because the big thing is sleep. If we don't have sleep, we can't make good decisions. And I learned a lot about team. You want to talk about team? We actually had two very different experiences with that Atlantic trip. So going one way versus the other. But in any case, so there we are in the Caribbean, and our income model is dried up except for our rentals. And I had been dreaming at this point. I'm still focused on the South Pacific, right? So we decided at that point, we're just going to figure it out as we go. We'll figure out, I'll scrape boat bottoms. and do miscellaneous electrical repairs. My wife is still heavily into sewing. She's sewing like canvas. She redid all the canvas on the boat. She does sail repair, all this thing. We're just going to work as we go. We're going to figure it out. So we left Grenada on our way to Bonaire, which is, it's a commitment because it's straight downwind, right? To go back to the Caribbean chain is a pretty significant thing. So it's a 3.5 day trip. And we're 3 days in, and the last night, we can see Bonaire. We can see the lights of it. We hit a reef in the middle of the night, 3:00 in the morning, and we lost the entire boat. We're on the beach at 11 a.m. with everything that we can carry.
Oh my God. So you had just like literally washed up to the shore with whatever you had.
Well, we had the Venezuelan Coast Guard who, to save fuel, they shut off all the lights at night. Otherwise we would have seen, the island. Yep. They rescued us. They gave us our beds, and the next day we're like, oh, really? Can we go back? Because there's, obviously we can't just grab everything all at once. And we wanted to go back, and they said, well, what was stable yesterday may not be stable today. We don't know how we're going to get back there. And the call came in like, helicopter to Caracas, inbound 30 minutes, grab your bag. And there we were. Like, that was that. It was pretty crazy. And I will say my maker was watching out for us because we made it through relatively unscathed. And we spent 4 days in Venezuela, which this is 2016. It wasn't great then. It still isn't awesome now.
Right. But maybe not quite as chaotic as it becomes in later years when you guys are there. So.
Right. Sure. So it's, anyway, so we hopped a plane and figured out to spend a week in Bonaire, which is where we were headed. And then bam, we're catapulted back into our lives, in Colorado, which was again, not by choice. So, So
because you don't have a boat, like you've got to reset the whole thing. Right.
Yep. So let's just assess here. Lost the boat. Lost the business. Totally wrecked. Everything's just totally wrecked. Right. So we came back in 2016 and I'm like, well, what do we do? I mean, I had to kind of, figure it out. Eventually we got into our house, which had now been kind of torn up by the tenants. So now we're into a remodel at the same time. And, not trying to make this a pity party, but this was like, this is the reality at this time. So for me at that time, obviously I was really frustrated. There's a lot of pain going on. I had not intended to come back and do electrical work. And yet I'm seeing that made the most sense to do. Right. I'm looking at, I've got 2 kids that are now, we got college coming up and, I need to rebuild a nest egg and, we gotta get restarted, I had also meanwhile been taking coaching and consulting classes myself because I had been on the beneficial end of that for so long that it really made such a huge difference. And that's what I decided I really had wanted to do was to do coaching and consulting. And I said, well, how do I learn this? I mean, how is this going to work? And so I started taking classes and implementing it as I grew the business for the second time.
Yeah. It's the perfect test case, but I want to just pause and just recap this situation because, here you had your dream, right? And you're the kind of guy, and we've talked about this, that failure is not an option, but now you've got 2 major obstacles that have been thrown your way, like you said, lost the business, lost the boat within the span of a year, right? And now you're having to rebuild everything. I love that you're taking the coaching and consulting classes. Is that what's giving you the motivation and the drive to rebuild the business, or where are you pulling that energy from at this point?
I mean, it was really out of necessity. I'm like, I got to make something happen. I mean, I did actually call up some friends of mine and I started to go maybe do some work for them. And I'm like, hey man, I don't have any tools anymore, but I got the knowledge, and I just started realizing that it was possible. And a good friend of mine, I'm still in touch with today, and we were coworkers throughout many, many years. He said, well, just do it again. And I'm like flabbergasted. My jaw hit the floor. I'm like, how could I do it? How could I do it again? Right? I couldn't even get the phone number back. The phone number was tied up in bankruptcy court. Oh. I actually went to, the only thing I could do was to get the name back. And luckily the interim owner that's a kindest term I could use,
Yep.
had not damaged the reputation because he was running it in a different way. And so all I had to do was basically approach some of the other marketing channels that I had used and said, hey, I'm back.
Yep.
And the economy was like just jamming back in, 2016, 2017. Like it was just really like a rocket. And I just started just doing it all over again, just climbing the ladder. And this time, I still had that knowledge. I still was able to get some of these contacts in there. Obviously, I still knew how to do the work. I started accumulating tools, started buying vehicles again. But I would never take a loan for these things. I would just always save up enough, do some forecasting and say, okay, now it's time to pull the trigger for the next one. But still, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, did you find it easier to do it the second time because you knew the path, like you knew where you needed to go? Did you find it easier in a way?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's certainly I had the knowledge, so I didn't have to start from the ground up. Mm-hmm. But I will say that I was so angry about having to come back and do this again, and it really tapped into some of the really emotional side of me, where I had a lot of physical pain from anger, and I hated it. I hated every second of it. I'm like, I don't want to do this, but I feel like I have to. I'm being dragged, why me? Blah, 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 blah. Right.
Yeah.
And it was through the coach training that I was actually able to unearth and open up some of that. And then I got to go to work on that. Right. So that was the emotional realm. It's very, very nonlinear. And I decided, well, I'm going to start, I guess, hiring people and, moving things up. But still, I was asking the universe, I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I really don't want to. I wish something could happen and I just wouldn't be able to do field work anymore. Well, in August,
sometimes your wishes come true, right?
They do.
Not in the best way, but
they do. And in August of 2019, I was doing a little home repair and I hit my hand with the saw. And I literally was out. It went from like, oh, I might have a small injury to, wow, this might set me back for a while, to like, I am permanently changed. Okay. Like I can't physically do the work, which is what I was kind of, again, careful what you wish for. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I was I was building the business at this time, taking coaching classes, applying that as I learned it. And I was looking at some elective surgeries. I talked to every single hand specialist I could talk to and get a hold of. And in January of 2020, I'm like, okay, well, I got this elective surgery. And then we all know what happened in March of 2020.
Yeah.
All elective surgeries went out the window because COVID hit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's when I really dug in.
Yeah.
Actually, I said, all right, I am going to now learn how to invest in others. And I really feel like I was called back to do this a second time, to learn how to train properly and how to give to others. I mean, I was to the point where I had never paid for health insurance for employees. I was like, that's just too expensive. I can't do that. But now with this injured hand and I couldn't do the physical work, I said, even if I have to take it out of my salary, I will pay for it.
Yeah.
And you know what? I never did have to take it out of my salary. Never once. I got top of the line health insurance for the guys and made sure that they were taken care of first and that they won, because if your team wins, you win. Your team has to win first. Right. And so I really feel like I was brought back to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it is funny. Like, it's not funny, but like, you have to be careful what you wish for and what you manifest. And you didn't want to do field work and you thought it was because you're just like burnt out and whatever. But I'm sitting here listening to the story. I'm like, well, maybe it was because this is what you were truly supposed to do in this business, right? You were truly supposed to build others up, and you started it within the first iteration of the business. But it sounds like now you get to finish that journey and you have these new skill sets as a coach and a consultant, and you know how to fuel them and serve the team in just an elevated way of the first iteration of the business.
Absolutely. And I started to dig into what really motivates these people. How do they see the world? Through my coach training, I started to realize that, we all wear these glasses or lenses, and we wear them so much that we believe that that's our truth, right? That is the world. Not only that, we think that everybody else sees things the way that we do. And nothing could be further from the truth. It's absolutely untrue.
Yeah.
So I started taking these coach training courses, and I took an Enneagram course.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if you're familiar or if you've done it yourself, but yeah. So I'm a 4, by the way. And that was quite a journey to figure that one out, which is the intense creative. Feel things deeply, and being intuitive and all that. I'm like, finally, it kind of made sense how I always felt like I was a little bit different, riding a different path. So in any case, there's also a level 2 training that I did, which was to apply that towards team. And it was so impactful for me that I actually did a secondary training and flew out to San Francisco and did this whole training to learn how that applies with the team. And I did Enneagram on all of my guys. I asked for their permission, of course. Yeah. And I'm like, I want to figure this out. And man, that was transformational. That was absolutely transformational, because I got to understand what motivated them and what triggered them more than they knew themselves. Right.
Wow. Yeah.
and yeah. Go ahead.
And it's like, so, it's such a differentiator in your industry too, because like, look, we can stereotype any industry, but when we're talking about contracting services and things like this is not the type of experience most employees have in your industry. So what was their reaction to you pouring into them like this and trying to understand and really better your relationships with your team?
It was mixed. It was mixed. I mean, some of the guys are just like, yeah, this is just, voodoo stuff, whatever. I mean, if that's what I guess you're my boss and you're paying for it. So, whatever. And some of the other guys were like, that's really interesting, because this would come with a full 42-page report and I would just give it to them. I'd be like, here, this is yours.
Yeah.
Do with it whatever you want. I appreciate you revealing this to me, because it helps me figure out how best to communicate with you and understand you and to help you and support you. Right. And what I learned to do is just, call up the guys on a regular basis, be like, hey, what's in your way? What's going on today? What's your block today? How can I help? And just remove the roadblocks and help move it forward. So really understanding the triggers and the motivations that underlie the behaviors that are very transparent to all of us.
Yeah.
You just can't measure it. You can't measure it. It was immense.
So I can see from you now, but like I can imagine too, now you're really starting to enjoy this role in the business. So how has that transformed or changed what your short-term goals are related to the hand surgery or even the long-term future of the business?
Sure. So I still had kind of this big chip on my shoulder. I was now starting to gain momentum. I was starting to gain strength. And I'm like, let's just keep building this and keep hiring people. And really, I was looking for some validation in, the failed iteration previously of trying to sell the business. And, I just started growing at one man, one van, and trying investing in the people. And, eventually I got to a point where I doubled the previous size of the business.
Wow.
COVID was hard for a lot of businesses, but it was great for remodeling because people they couldn't travel. And yet, in areas where economies are strong, they're making home offices, they're investing in their own house or infrastructure. And here where I am, a lot of our work is in Boulder, Colorado. There's just so much action going on. Google is here, Microsoft is here, it's just really scaling. And I doubled it and then I sustained it again. Actually, I worked with a consultant at this time. I sat down with her and I said, I want to double my business. I want to sell it again. And she helped me get there. Nice. And so a year ago in December, I finally doubled the business. I'd sustained that for another year. And I said, I got no more mountains to climb. Yeah. My daughter was graduating high school. My son is now a senior. So he's set to graduate here in May. And I just there's no more hill to climb. And so I put my business on the market last December. And, we worked through a broker, found a buyer, and, this last July sold it again.
Yeah. Wow. And what was the difference going through it the second time? Like what was different about the second sale than the first sale?
So the second sale, first off, there was no seller financing. I learned that one. that was not going to happen again.
Yeah.
And there was a lot more legal involvement on both sides. There's a lot more engagement from the buyer. Also, I was going through a broker this time versus previous I hadn't, which I really feel it was the right thing to do. It's, in my opinion, it's awfully hard to keep that confidentiality and, market your business. Of course, at the same time, because I took my eye off the business, my business actually shrank a little bit in last January through March. So which is just prone to happen. Whatever we focus on, whatever we put our energy on, that's what grows, right?
Yep. It's very difficult to maintain a business while you're in the process of selling it, right? Because your priority is just shifted, right? It's not about growth, it's about exit at that point. So absolutely. So definitely a much better outcome for you. And now not a whole lot of risk because there's not seller financing involved, but what does your role look like now? Did you help the business transition? Are you still involved at all? Or what does the next path look like for you?
Sure. So I am contracted through to the end of this calendar year. They wanted me to stay for another full year. I said, I'll give you 6 months. I mean, really. So I've been under the guise of, transition services, which I've been doing, trained in admin and, helping the new owner find his feet as well. And so now I've actually been going into my new endeavor, which is to do coaching and consulting myself. And my dream and vision actually is sailboat coaching, taking people on experiential trips on a boat and completely out of their element, and to take them on, actual experiential multi-day trips. So they get, personal development, team building and training. So that's where I'm headed right now. I've actually have a book coming out in March, which is an amalgamation of my learning experiences and the fundamental building blocks to growing a sustainable business from both iterations, and mixed in with a bunch of sailing stories and personal development as well. So that's what I've got going, and I'm going to be doing a fair amount of mastermind groups as well as executive coaching, and really trying to give back because I know it's real. Like the benefit of coaching and consulting, it truly has an impact, and it certainly helped me. It was a really big part of my journey.
Oh my God. I love it. I can't wait to read the book. You're going to have to come back on when you release it in the spring too. I'm very excited for that. I mean, the question I'm dying to know and everybody else is dying to know is yes, you're going to do these experiences on the sailboat and stuff, but have you bought another catamaran yet? Are you ready to make that jump?
That's actually a question I'm asked on a regular basis, so I don't really mind it. I haven't yet because I'm really trying to figure out what the next steps are going to look like. There's a lot of stuff going on with getting my kids launched and getting them fully supported as well, and really trying to figure out what the timing of that really looks like. My main focus here in my role that I'm concentrating on is being a father, right? And I love being a dad. I would always love it. I didn't know I was going to love it when I became a father, but I grew to love it, and I wouldn't want it any other way. So to launch, support my kids to become adults, because we're raising adults, we're not raising kids. And to help them find their success, which it seems like they are, that's really my focus. And of course, I'm dreaming of the South Pacific. In fact, I'm doing a trip down to the Pacific side where the Baja Peninsula here in January, do some reconnaissance. We're actually chartering a catamaran out there, and going to be doing some investigating and some celebrating too.
Good.
So so I haven't yet. It's certainly on the horizon.
Well, I'm glad you're going to make it out to the South Pacific. Before we get to our last question, which I ask everybody, Erik, I have a question for you. You've been on such an interesting journey. I mean, your entire life, you've gone back to what you wanted to do was you wanted to get out there. You wanted to experience life. You've done so much of that, but there's been major challenges you faced. Would you have done anything differently?
I would have tried to get more skin in the game from the first buyer.
Okay.
But, even with all of that tragedy and all of that, the experiences that I had with my kids, I wouldn't trade it for anything. We went to Morocco, it completely changed my perspective on Islam. and the Muslim community. In fact, I came back and my kids were kind of became the ambassadors for new students coming in, greeting the new people coming in. Would I do anything differently? I would have maybe not taken myself so darn seriously.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that, because a lot of the pressure is right here between the two ears.
Yeah.
But here's the good news. If we create our own problems, we can also create our own solutions, right?
Very, very true. Very true. Very positive outlook on that. I might steal that in the future.
Sure.
And then, I'll ask our last question, because that might be your answer. But my last question for every guest is that if you had to wrap your story, your experience, everything into one quote or one piece of advice for business owners, what would that be? I
would say, and someone's probably said this already, so you'll have to cite this. I'm not really sure, but I always try and live by the question, what would you do if you knew that you couldn't fail?
Mm-hmm.
If you knew with absolute certainty that you couldn't fail. And that question really gets into what's holding us back.
Yeah. What's
stopping us from really stepping into what we really want? And so many of us live by limitation and fear. And listen, man, we only go around once.
Yeah.
This is it. This is not a dress rehearsal. But you know what? Go for it. Find your own adventure, and just throw caution in the wind and just do it. Okay. So failure is a result. It doesn't have to be a judgment. It's not a life sentence, right? It's an answer. And there can be many other questions and other avenues to take. That's what I would say.
It's a perfect way to wrap up your story. Erik, thank you so much for sharing your story, for being on How I Sold. I really appreciate it. And we can't wait to hear about the next step of the journey and have you back on when you release the book too.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll keep in touch. Sounds great.
Thanks. That's Erik Holmberg, founder of Windward Electric, an entrepreneur that has built and sold the same business twice. And he's followed his passion and dream for sailing with his family. Very few entrepreneurs could have sustained and succeeded like Erik did, and his passion for building businesses and helping entrepreneurs will only propel him to success in the future as a consultant. Erik, thank you so much for sharing your inspiring story. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the show this week. If you want to support us, spread the word by subscribing on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. You can also leave us a 5-star review or post about us on social media. We really do appreciate it. If you'd like to learn more about How I Sold or apply to be on the show, go to howisold.co. I'm Jessica Fialkovich, and you've been listening to How I Sold.
Thank you for listening to How I Sold, presented by Exit Factor. Please follow us on your favorite podcasting app so you don't miss an episode. Another way to support the show is by leaving a review. Find more information about How I Sold and Exit Factor, including how to be on the show at www.exitfactor.com/howisold.